Hi, everybody. Welcome to Bottom Line with Bob and Kendel Ehrlich. It is another week of potpourri. There's just so much to talk about. We can't decide. So here we are in the midst of the August heat, and we are going to talk just about everything.
Potpourri summer. All right, I have a bunch here for you.
Okay,
let's. Ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
First, a bulletin on the woke Olympics. Woke politics hits Olympics, and as predicted, primetime numbers were way down. Major hits, particularly during prime time. I do believe that no crowds contributed to the relative lack of interest in this Olympics.
There's other things, too.
COVID era certainly hurt.
Yes.
But in America, when you disrespect the country, disrespect the flag, do your thing, it's going to hurt everybody. And I think that's precisely what occurred here.
Especially in the summer coming out of COVID. People have lots of other choices right now. So maybe they weren't rearranging their schedule in order to see the Olympics.
Well, a Monmouth poll, interesting, babe. Listen to this. 43% of Americans had no interest whatsoever in watching the games this year. Now,
that's pretty high for...
Think about our family. We're not a Olympics family, track and field. And
right.
It's that we're really not that family, but we typically watch.
Well, I enjoy the stories.
You enjoy the stories. You enjoy the Americans winning. You enjoy the Star Spangled Banner. They could play it 8 million times.
Right.
You could still get choked up every time.
And you want to win. You want to beat these other countries. You want America to be number one.
Exactly.
At least we do.
Beat the commies. It never changes, right? So I do believe that the anti-Americanism that played out the women's soccer team and Gwen Berry hurt. It hurts overall. It made us less enthusiastic. And that's not fair, by the way, for the vast majority of our athletes who stood there, hands over
so
heart,
proud.
whole 9 yards.
Right.
It's unfair. And a couple of the women's soccer players did the right thing as well.
Correct.
But in any event, woke politics hurts your ratings. We've talked about that with respect to the Oscars, the NBA, the whole 9 yards. Nothing different there. Second, this is just those of us of a certain age remember the helicopters. Those of us of a certain age remember Saigon. This was 1975. I was 17, 18. You were much younger.
Correct.
Yeah. We remember Vietnam. We remember the U.S. Embassy. We remember America hightailing it out of that country. And now we're seeing that movie again play out in Afghanistan.
In sort of an embarrassing way.
Well, it's always an embarrassing way when America runs and hides. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. We are not neocons. We supported President Trump. We supported a lot of conservatives who repeatedly pointed out it's 15, 18, 20 years later, tens of billions of dollars, and yet the government controls the major cities, but not rural Afghanistan. It goes back to the old lesson that we repeatedly cite but never follow, which is you can't nation build. The military is not built to nation build. The purpose of the United States military is to kill our enemies.
Which we did when we went in
Wildly
based
successful.
on 9/11.
Wildly successful.
That's why we were there.
That was a CIA special operations operation, wildly successful. The Northern Alliance and all that. They made movies about it, Rambo and all that. But the next 20 years was basically devoted to nation build in a country, in a culture that's never really been a nation. And it's failed.
It's tribal.
So as we speak, now let me make this point, because people rightfully will say, well, President Trump was on this very same route. And that's correct. In fact, he had run on that in 2016, that wars to nowhere got to end. But in this case, I hope and I think and I trust in my heart that President Trump would have said, all right, we can draw down, but we're going to keep a residual force there, 1. We're going to keep special operators there, 2. We're going to keep some assets there, 3. We're going to have air power there, 4, so that at least the folks in the cities, in the major provinces, in the capitals, the provincial capitals, can have a decent life.
Can be safe.
Can be safe. Cannot get slaughtered. In this case, it was out now. Here's date certain. Taliban says, okay, we'll wait for our offensive the day after. It's precisely what's occurred. We've seen this occur repeatedly around the world when you give the enemy a date certain for your departure. Right?
Yeah.
So,
and I thought that President Trump actually said that he was going to leave a certain amount of people there, and a certain amount of security there.
You have to distinguish a drawdown between troops and special assets.
Right.
In this case, it was leave the assets behind, the trucks, we left everything behind. Now the Taliban owns it.
Great. Now they have it.
So this is a bad storyline. It's a bad narrative. It's another very negative chapter in the first year Biden administration. Right now, the provincial capitals are falling almost daily. Kabul.
It changes literally within 24 hours right now.
Yeah. Yes, and we're talking about days, literally. We're talking about days. So this is not good. It's been handled poorly, and we'll see what occurs in the next week or so.
Sorry for those folks.
So sorry for particularly the people that helped us who've been left behind. Item 3, potpourri. Huntington Beach, California, a city you know a little bit. We know a little bit about. Very wealthy.
Beautiful.
Beautiful city.
Just beautiful.
6 members of the city council, including the mayor, are now subject to recall because the people are saying, wait a second, your woke agenda is not what we voted for. And in this case, it's more zoning density issues.
High rise and high density. Yeah.
Coming
ruining
to
that
Beach.
view. It's really literally on a hill that they protect so that people have view of the beautiful ocean that's right there.
Not according to the progressives here, I guess. So there's...
Well,
folks
they're not big on property rights.
They're rising up.
They don't want property. They don't. They don't protect property. They don't care about property.
So we
rights.
have a mini resistance, maybe not so many resistance rising in California. You have the Gavin Newsom recall, which is proceeding apace. You have the LA prosecutor subject to recall. You have Huntington Beach here. You see the resistance. You see the resistance making some progress. It makes you feel good.
For the people that haven't left, there are people now trying to fight.
Yeah.
So that's good.
And that's what the resistance is all about. Fourth item for potpourri, inflation. The conservative media this week was talking about a return to the Carter era. Welcome back, Carter. Welcome back, Carter. And the not so funny part of the 1970s was inflation, because inflation is the most hurtful tax on the poor and the near poor you can think of.
And where did you feel it the most? In the gas tank.
In the gas tank, energy costs, correct. So rising cost of living is now a fact. It's a familiar storyline, again, for those of us who lived through the 1970s. Federal deficit through the roof. Nobody in D.C., with the exception of a few true conservatives, seems to care. It's still not that tangible of an issue with regard to the budget deficit and the spending. What is becoming tangible and showing up in the polls is inflation, because people understand there's no upside to inflation. They, again, tax on the poor.
Yeah, but the spending's crazy too. I know you're going to get to that, but the spending right now is also crazy. The
spending is absolutely insane. The news this week was that GOP leadership, the powers that be on the Republican side in D.C., have decided to make inflation a front burner issue, which I think is the right call for 2022.
Yeah, because people feel it right now.
Yeah, they sure do. So here you go. This is for you. There was many reports, in fact, about a Stop the Bleeding dinner for Kamala, for the Vice President of the United States, Vice President Harris. A Stop the Bleeding dinner attended by reportedly eight top female Democrat operatives. She's had a very, very poor start. Her first foreign trip was a disaster. The border crisis, we talked about that last week, not all her fault because the president has set her up in our view. But she's off to a very poor start. So the crisis dinner was about what to do. And I'm going to shock you here, Kendel Ehrlich. I want to shock you. One of the results of that dinner was a narrative that whenever she gets bad press, or she might get bad press, the press is going to be warned. The legacy media is going to be warned. You better not report that. You better not give her bad press because that's sexist.
Yeah, of course.
All right.
Of course.
Comment, Kendel Ehrlich.
The sexist card. Are you surprised? Can't be surprised at all on that one. Guess what? It's working. They're not reporting really on anything. Have you heard anything this summer about her? Not a lick.
Well, part of that's a function of the Biden administration keeping her
right. Exactly. Wherever.
Outside
no one
bit.
knows.
Yeah.
No one knows. And that is a strategy as well.
But
so
blame
you're
sexism.
You're not gonna cover it all. And if you do, you're gonna be a sexist. Shocking.
It's called having it both ways.
Always.
It's really something,
It's always.
isn't it? It's
Hillary perfected that.
Yeah, I know. Oh boy. How about just doing a better job? That should have been, in our view, the result of that dinner. But again,
well, that's easy to say if somebody's capable.
Good point. All right, next potpourri item: Cuomo gone.
Amazing.
The resignation, the rapid demise. No allies left. Left-wing media loved him for years, for decades, until quite recently. He was seen as a VP contender. About the Emmy. About the book deal. A completely safe governor, deep blue state. Interestingly, for those of us on the right, it wasn't the nursing home scandal that brought him down. It wasn't the 15,000 or so deaths as a result of that policy call, well reported. It was the sexual harassment allegations that ultimately brought him down. So the COVID nursing home thing, he still survived. But in the end...
It shows you how strong the Me Too movement is.
Well, in the end, it was too many women accusers, too many believable stories, too many fleeing allies. We've seen that syndrome in politics always. Too much depth to the AG's report. Too much pressure to resign. And finally, he did. Your thoughts, Kendel Ehrlich?
Well, I think also that criminal investigation. Once the criminal investigation came out, I think that there was the negotiating tool for... we won't investigate anymore, which is an amazing thing. Now, there'll be, I guess, investigation with civil suits.
Well, yeah,
but they're not going to investigate the criminal action anymore as a result of him resigning.
There'll be discovery in those cases, obviously.
Right.
So.
Well, of course there'll be discovery. But my point is the criminal ramifications and the thought of going to jail is... I think the impetus for him to have stepped aside and let that criminal investigation, quote unquote, go away.
Could very well be. So
yeah, we don't know all those facts. We don't know all of the ins and outs yet, but
by the way,
that seems the most logical.
He resigned. He could run again. And in New York?
Well, who knows?
All right.
Coming back again from that, though, is usually very difficult.
It's New York.
Okay.
Bill de Blasio was mayor. Bill de Blasio was mayor. Come on. Next item. This is the weekly item, but we can't get away from it. And there's a moral emerging when it comes to the border. For 7-8 months now, we have had chaos at the border. We've talked about it repeatedly. Reverse stay in Mexico, reverse catch and release, Border Patrol undermanned, the whole 9 yards. Never good news. Over 200,000 migrants showing up at the border in July alone. Just negligence, just suffering, just kids in difficult situations, very difficult situations, just chaos. Please recall that this is summertime. This is supposed to be the easy time for migration because it's so hot in the desert. Typically, we don't see a whole lot of traffic to the border in July and August. Mm-hmm. These are historic numbers in July and August.
Right.
So that bodes very poorly for the fall.
And yet with no testing, no masking, nothing to do with COVID. It's as if COVID doesn't exist on the border. Yeah. Or at an Obama birthday party.
You had to get that one in, didn't you? You had to slip that. That's not even on the potpourri list, but you had to sleep it.
I can't believe it. It's just terrible.
Well, okay, hold on a second.
The island is full of COVID.
Well, but it was a sophisticated audience.
Right.
The angles here are interesting because maybe the most concerning aspect to the story, besides what's occurred, is the reticence of the Biden administration to tell us, taxpayers, to tell executives, regardless of party, where these folks are going, where they're going to be resettled. How many have COVID? many don't have tests. How are local governments going to finance, going to support this huge influx of migrants into their communities? Why can't we find out where they're going? These are all, again,
basic questions.
Basic questions. The moral here is, the emerging moral is that even in a woke era, even with dominant control of the media by the left, even in an era where Democrats control both houses of Congress and the presidency, this is emerging as the number one issue in the country. It's hurting the president's poll numbers. Democrats of all stripes are beginning to take notice that this is hurting them. And now the midterm elections are still a way off, November next year. But this is an issue with legs, believe it or not.
I think immigration has been an issue with legs for a long time. I think it really helped President Trump in 2016 for sure.
Well, but
and it's going to help the next presidential.
Well, we'll see. We'll see, because this has been so chaotic, so bad, such a horrible message.
So negligent.
Yes. And again, it may be actually hurting the administration. So, weekly update on infrastructure, the next item here. We've seen 19 Republican senators support the Phase 1 infrastructure bill, which actually had infrastructure in it. We know in the end it wasn't paid for. And how did the Democratic majority, the Majority Leader Schumer in New York, react when CBO scored the bill and CBO rendered its decision that the bill wasn't paid for? Did he sit back, begin renegotiation, take the bill apart? No, he just rammed it through. So those Republicans who said it was paid for, wrong. It's not paid for.
It's been a history of ramming bills through and then deciding,
both parties,
then understanding what they say.
Both parties, in fairness. Now, the second bill is not infrastructure. They've called infrastructure. And contained in the second bill, free community college tuition. This is just a sampling. A civilian climate corps, modeled, I guess, on the CCC during the New Deal. Obamacare expansion, of course. Universal pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds. Repealing the $10,000 cap in blue states for local and state deduction on your taxes. A pathway to citizenship for migrants, of course. Subsidies for clean electricity, but not natural gas. That's just a sampling of the quote-unquote infrastructure in the non-infrastructure bill. Again, the first bill had real infrastructure, roads and bridges, and you could talk about various provisions in that bill that in a stretch could be infrastructure as well. But in this case, this is a mini Green New Deal. It's a Democratic wish list, a leftist progressive wish list, all in one. $3.5 trillion, quote-unquote, infrastructure. Bernie Sanders is now the chairman of the Budget Committee in control of the Senate.
Yikes.
This is what I've been very careful about using words like socialism. I don't use communism. But this is what creeping socialism, this is what creeping Western European style huge welfareism looks like.
Right.
This is it. This is in very tangible form. So again, this is
it's so funny though. You know, they never let Bernie be the nominee because they thought that he would scare off the electorate.
They thought he would lose.
And he would lose.
But here's his agenda.
Here it is.
But again, if you recall, candidate Biden said he would support the Bernie agenda. He would support, but so they had it both ways. They had some Democrats, some voters, some folks in the middle, some Republicans, some never Trumpers saying, "Oh, it's Joe Biden. He's the old style '60s liberal. He's not going to be that crazy." And then they had wink, wink, wink. Not really wink, wink, wink. It was a deal reported by the press, by the media. Hey, the Bernie agenda is going to be our agenda going forward, and that's precisely the case. They had it both ways.
Well, they had it both ways, but he was in the basement the whole election. He wasn't asked a question. So the electorate really never got a chance to see
not buying
him.
that. Not buying that.
Come on.
Not buying.
Come on.
The rhetoric, the narratives, the platform. was all about not traditional liberalism. It was progressivism.
That was inside baseball. They portrayed him as old Joe and
Amtrak Joe.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's now
Mr. Delaware and no big deal, a nice guy, and in the basement. Oh, do you want to ask him a question? Oh, I'm sorry, he's unavailable.
Well, again, for anybody that paid attention, you're right. The vehicle was old, but the rhetoric, the narratives, the philosophical underpinnings were new. And that's precisely what we're getting
They're doing
now.
it, that's for sure. And he's following right along with what he's told.
Three more items here, my dear.
Okay. Oh, God.
I know.
Can
Do you have a headache?
Yes, I do. I need uplifting.
Nah.
Talk about our summer vacation.
Why should you be uplifted? Why should you feel good, huh?
Gosh.
We
How
don't.
about-
Vaccine passports.
Let's talk golf.
Mrs. Lawyer here. I got a constitutional question for you. Increasing resistance to the idea of vaccine passports. On the right, rhetorically, hey, wait a second. We need vaccine passports, but it's racist to require photo ID at the polls?
Right.
Yeah. The constitutional issue here is interesting. There's a proposal now they're mulling over in the Biden administration. I think they're going to continue mulling it. We're not going to see it, but it would require a vaccine passport for interstate travel.
Wow.
Now, that's got to be unconstitutional, you would think.
Well, what vaccines? Through your whole life?
Good point.
I mean, really, do you have to?
Or just this
and,
one?
and what about HIPAA?
It's setting a predicate here.
What about HIPAA?
Nobody talks about HIPAA anymore. So this is an interesting constitutional question. We'll let it pass. We'll let it hang right now because it's not a news item yet. They haven't decided on this particular approach
Seriously,
at this
though,
time.
what about the non-vaxxers who don't like measles vaccines or any of that? And I've seen advertisements for, you're getting your COVID shot. You need to get these other vaccines done. What about that?
They're going to be, looks like, tied down to their hometown at some point.
Wow,
so vaccine passports, again.
I'm sure the ACLU will come forward and be very helpful in
Don't
that
hold your breath on
litigation.
that. Real quick, on Hunter Biden, do we need to say anything? New tape, new laptops.
How much more do you need to see? It's so ugly. Yikes. Ugh.
Just let me ask a rhetorical question here to further dampen your mood. Can you imagine a Trump kid?
No.
If this, just fill in, take out Hunter.
Well, first of all, you'd be seeing the films every day.
Yeah. So this is a real Russian story. We finally have a Russian story, but not the one the press wanted to report. So the storylines appears to be, it just never changes.
Is this a Russian spy instead of the Chinese spy?
Now, there is some speculation in Washington that the pressure is building. There's now so many scandals. It'd be like a Cuomo situation. You're okay, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay, you're not okay. At some point, you reach the inflection point. At some point, it's just, Hunter, enough. Take your artwork, take the women, take the laptops.
Go back to Delaware.
Be very quiet. We're not going to put up with you anymore. So far, it's just been a conspiracy of silence on the left and very effective. Yikes.
That's what they do. They protect.
This is going to bring you down the worst. I saved the worst for last.
Thanks.
I'm not bringing you up this week. Sorry, honey. I'm taking you on vacation, so that'll be fun. This was the headline the other day. We saw this woman, this parent interviewed, and I want everybody listening to our show to wrap your brain around this and try to get to sleep tonight while you're thinking about it. The NEA, National Education Association, is suing a Rhode Island parent to block her request of a local school system to gain access to instructional material. So let me just parcel that thing out. A third party, the NEA, Teachers Union, National Teachers Union, is now trying to intervene to stop a public school parent in Rhode Island from gaining access to public information concerning instruction on sex, gender, and race in a school system financed by public dollars. This is the arrogance the Biden era has brought to our public discourse. This is the arrogance that this teachers union brings. It will now sue to stop a parent from finding out the ways and means of education with respect to that parent's kid in the public school system? Think about that one.
It's outrageous, but let me say, I don't understand how the NEA has jurisdiction in the lawsuit.
Standing.
Yeah, standing.
Legal standing. Neither do I, but they have gone on record saying we're going to stop the obviously right-wing conspiracy. It's the right-wingers out there trying to stop us, blah, blah, blah. Again, this is all public. It's a public school system. It's a public school parent. These are basically freedom of information requests. It's public information as to how your child is being instructed by the public school system.
And if it's all okay,
every right to
why are they hiding it? If it's all okay, why would they hide it? I mean, seriously.
They're not for transparency?
Right, exactly. Why wouldn't they be transparent? It's your child you're sending to a public school paid by taxpayers. Why aren't they being transparent?
Because when it comes to woke, transparency is not
because
the
they don't
resolution.
Want you to know what they are teaching your child.
Precisely right.
I urge everyone in school districts to do exactly what this parent is doing, to find out what is being taught to your child.
Woke flourishes in darkness.
Oh, of course.
It appears.
Well, you know what? COVID really opened our eyes
Thank God.
to much of this.
That's a good point.
That was like one positive thing of COVID. People started paying attention because their kids were able to hear what their kids were learning at home.
The only positive aspect to the last 18 months was what you just articulated. It was, hey, let's take a listen to that Zoom. This is what you're being educated. This is what you're being taught. This has nothing to do with reading, writing, arithmetic.
Right.
This is social indoctrination from the left that we're paying for. Wrong. Parents are stepping up. Parents are screaming bloody murder. You're going to see these school board meetings.
Yeah, well, they're already on TV.
Yeah. It's August, by the way. This is great. You're going to see.
It's also about the masking. And it's about looking.
It's really about curriculum.
Well, that's the most important thing, I think.
But masking
still,
too. You're right.
Masking too.
So again, parents, show up.
Keep fighting.
Don't back down.
And run for the school board.
And support your politicians at all levels of government who are supporting you.
Right, and not the school board.
And if you have a quote-unquote liberal, ask he or she why they're so silent.
And what they're hiding. What are you hiding?
Hiding?
Why wouldn't you give me that information?
This should be completely transparent, how your kids are being educated in the public schools. So, all right, are you down? Are you upset? Yeah. I have reached my goal. If you are so upset that you're going to go, well, it's too early to drink. We don't drink too much anyway. Anyway. But this is enough to make you. The moral here is, if you are a parent, if you're anyone, if you're a taxpayer, show up. Scream. Write a letter. Write an email. Demand action by your local officials. Become an activist. Resist what they're doing to our kids. Resist what they're doing to our culture. Resist what they're doing to our country.
Thanks, everybody. We want you to be uplifted. And if you feel like you need to be uplifted, you go to bobehrlich.com and you can read all things Bob Ehrlich. You'll feel better. It's not all a downer.
Yes, we bring you up from time to time.
Western Journal articles, and you can hear our podcasts off of there. And, of course, follow us on Twitter.
And forthcoming book, which will really bring you up because it will remind you of
the good times.
4 years of success. Thanks, everyone. Godspeed.